The college football playoff is reformatting, and it benefits us. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome to Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from ESPN Central Texas. Thank you for making Locked On Big 12 your first listen every single day. Today, let's tackle the college football playoff reformat. Josh Pate probably hates your football team. BYU and Texas Tech hoops are legit. Let's go back to yesterday's show where I talked about the ACC's implosion as well as the new 5+7 format being voted on as it was approved yesterday. One of the things that I mentioned was that in this show, I strive for 3 E's: entertain, engage, and inform, which I thought was obviously sarcastic, but you all, the most commented thing was like, oh, inform doesn't start with an E. So I want to go back, say that was sarcasm, and today I'm going to give you the 3 E's: entertain, engage, and inform. Get over it. The 5+7 format benefits the Big 12. If you're confused, here's a 30-second refresher on what exactly this means. It was a 6+6. 6 conference champions, the Power 5 conference title winners, and then the highest ranked conference title winner from the group of 5 would all go to the college football playoff, and then 6 at-large bids. Well, the Pac-12 falls apart. For a second, there was some limbo here. Oregon State, Washington State, did they get a bid? Are they the Pac-12? It's a grandfather rule. No, they signed a contract with the Mountain West and decided they're not really an entity, not really a conference here. They don't count. So now we had it a 6+6. We didn't really have 6 power conferences or 5 power conferences. So what are we going to do? We obviously moved to a 5+7. That's what we did. 4 Power 4 conference champions will go to the college football playoff, as well as the highest ranked conference champion from the group of 6 or whatever it is. That is 5 teams. 5 teams here that have automatic bids to the college football playoff. One thing to note with this, Oregon State and Washington State not being technically in a conference need as many teams as possible to be in the at-large category for them to be considered for the playoff. They can't win a conference championship, so they have to be an at-large bid. That's why Kirk Schulz, who's the president at Washington State, who's on the board, who had the opportunity to vote down, because it had to be unanimous, to vote down the restructuring, needed to vote for the 5+7. He did what was right for him. He did what was right for his school. He did what was right for Oregon State and what was right for the Big 12. Washington State and Kirk Schulz could have gotten revenge. They could have just held everything out and said, we're not going to do this. And then the Big 12 suffers. And here's why the Big 12 suffers. Here is what you need to bring to your water cooler. Here is when you say, what was the informed part of the show? What will make you sound smart? I truly believe this. And it feels objective, is that this benefits the Big 12 more than any other conference. The Big 12 has now more opportunities to get more teams in the college football playoff. Why? Because there are more at-large bids. We already know this conference is strong enough that the winner of our league will get an automatic bid. Let's play out a scenario here. Kansas State goes 13-0 next season, wins the Big 12 championship. They're locked in, right? Well, they beat Utah in the Big 12 championship. Utah finishes at, we'll say, 11-2. Utah at that point's probably ranked around the 9 stretch. I mean, they went to the Big 12 championship at 7. They fell to maybe 9 or 10. In that scenario, we like the fact there are more at-large teams right here. So now Utah, you're going to get in with your 11 wins. And then let's say even further that a Kansas is hanging around there. They're 11-1. They just got snubbed from the Big 12 championship game. Or they're 10-2, and they sit at number 13 in the country. And you'll remember 13 teams don't get in, but let's say that group of 5 team, that group of 5 conference champion is an undefeated 12-0 Boise State. Boise State's already number 10, so Kansas being at 13 means they're right teeter-tottering on that line of being in. And now we start the conversation of, can we justify Kansas at 11-1 or even 10-2 getting in over, say, Ole Miss, who fell to 12 at 9-3? And your case might be that Ole Miss should get in for sure. But guess what? If not for the change in format, Ole Miss isn't getting in, and obviously neither is Kansas. If we're going to be able to have these conversations about an extra team getting in, it's going to affect the Big 12. I wholeheartedly believe, because the AP, what do we know? The AP favors the Big Ten, especially the big dogs, your Michigans, Ohio States, Penn States. The AP also favors the SEC. We're not going to see a lot of love to the Big 12. You're going to see a lot of Big 12 teams teetering around that 15 range or teetering from the 12 to 25 range. There might be 5 Big 12 teams from 12 to 25. We don't see any of them in the top 10 or the top 12. And when that becomes the scenario, we need at-large bids. This just added one more at-large college bid and gave one more seat at the table to a team that did not win its conference. And that, to me, is going to benefit the Big 12 because we are so likely to have somebody held out in that conversation of limbo. Let's go back to 2014, where you had multiple competitive teams at the top of the conference that could have been college football playoff teams in a 12-team format. And there have been years where you could argue the Big 12 had 3 squads that were deserving to get into the college football playoff if it had 12 teams. That is the cause and effect of this decision and how it benefits the Big 12. Now, I do want to give some love here to Washington State President Kirk Schulz, who I've already mentioned. He's the guy who's on the board right now, who is representing the Pac-12 on the board and could have voted this whole thing down. He is quoted per ESPN saying, "For our 2 schools," talking Washington State and Oregon State, in the Pac-12 as it's currently configured, there is no question that 5-7 with 7 at-larges is better than 6 at-larges. What he is saying, for the sake of his 2 teams, and honestly for the sake of all of college football, namely the conference with the most teams in limbo, is that right here, it is the direct quote, 7 at-larges is better than 6 at-larges. Schulz continued to ESPN, "There's no question our football coaches are going to want to compete for one of those 7 slots, and 7 is going to be better than 6. That is the thesis of this whole thing. He was not petty. He put his team in a good light. He put himself in a good light. He put the Pac-2 that is just left from George Kliavkoff in a good light here. The 5+7 format, his compliance will help him down the road. One of the ways it will help him down the road, here's a nugget. If you care about if you're a humanitarian in college football and you care about the future of Oregon State and Washington State, which I think you should, right? If it was Kansas State, it was Texas Tech or UCF that got left out, you wouldn't be very happy about that. The kind of stipulation here, Kirk Schulz is like, "Hey, I'll comply, but I'm going to need you guys to help me out a little bit here because the Pac-12 still kind of exists. Can you give us a full revenue share here?" So Oregon State and Washington State will each make $6 million a year, despite not having a team locked into the college football playoff, because the Pac-12 still kind of exists according to the NCAA and its grace period, but also it doesn't exist according to the college football playoff, who now says that there are 4 Power 4 conferences. So not all is lost. Washington State and Oregon State will get a very hefty payday, not just from the Pac-12, but also from the College Football Playoff Board. Mississippi State President Mark Keenum, the chair of the College Football Playoff Board, told ESPN last week that none of the conferences know yet what the revenue distribution will be in the next contract. And that is maybe the biggest part of this that we'll get into next over the course of the next few months. The time's expiring. We're going to have to rework the whole college football playoff thing within the next 2 years and talk again about where to go from here. Do we have 16? Do we have host sites? Do we jump into this thing and say, hey, the Sugar Bowl gets to be a semifinal game every year, and the Rose Bowl? There's so many little things we have to pick apart here, and nobody really knows how to start. We have to negotiate again what the college football playoff looks like. So in the middle of Florida State attempting to leave the ACC and other teams following suit, in the middle of Notre Dame being left out of Notre Dame can't win a conference championship. They're not in a conference. This incentivizes Notre Dame to join a conference, but they cannot be a top 4 team in the college football playoff because those are the 4 teams that won their conference championships. And thus Notre Dame, get this is wild, will have to play 3 straight games in the college football playoff. If they make it, they won't get the opportunity for a bye in the first round, which is insane. There are so many little pieces of this, that being included, and moreover, the future of the college football playoff being included, that don't make a lot of sense. Or maybe they make some sense, or sense can be made of it. It just doesn't exist yet. It's not clear yet. What is clear is the Big 12 benefited from this decision. Kirk Schulz did the right thing. Kirk Schulz will be paid handsomely for doing the right thing. And other presidents and leaders in college football are ready to communicate with him. They're ready to work with him because they understand how not very fun this whole thing has been for Oregon State and Washington State, who might not survive in a power conference, but they will at least get a pretty hefty payday. And the Big 12 will have an opportunity to add one more team in the college football playoff. And I think as many as 3 could get in from this conference. And I'm not insane. That's real. This is Locked On Big 12. Josh Pate hates your football team. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Game Time is where I go when I need tickets. I just think like, oh, shoot, I want to go to the game today. And I go to Game Time and I get tickets to the game. I always do it the day of. They're way cheaper the day of. Last minute tickets, flash deals, zone deals, easy to find and buy tickets, every kind of event in your area. View smallest seats in the venue, lowest prices guaranteed, event cancellation protection, job loss protection as well. See right now the view from your seat by downloading the Game Time app. Game Time has deals on tickets right up at the start of the event and even an hour after it starts. It's the place to find last minute seats. Find exclusive flash deals right now at Game Time. Take the guesswork out of buying with code Locked On for $20 off in the app your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Again, use code Locked On, LOCKEDON, for $20 off your first purchase using Game Time. I kind of scoff, laugh a bit, mentioning Josh Pate hating your football team because I actually really like Josh Pate. No matter how you feel about him, I like Josh Pate. I like his stuff. He tells it like it is. He has brash opinions sometimes, and I feel like I have brash opinions too. Josh Pate has joined Locked On. I've hosted shows where Josh Pate has been a guest before, and he's always been spectacular and given his time to me, and I like watching his stuff. You might hate him because of what he said about your team in the power rankings of the Big 12 programs heading into 2024. Pate put Utah at number 1. As you know, I've had Utah at number 1 in most of mine. I agree with that. Kansas State's in his top 5. Oklahoma State's in his top 5. TCU's up there as well. I don't know if Texas Tech being at 4, I think it's a little bit too high because we haven't seen Joey McGuire win consistently yet. His 2 years have been a bit tumultuous, but he's a hell of a recruiter, and I don't hate it. What I do think is wild is at 16, Cincinnati. At 15, we'll get into that. Cincinnati, I understand, but he did in the video. If you watch the video, it's great. He goes like Cincinnati, whatever. 15, BYU, 14, Baylor, 13, Arizona State. Houston's at 12, West Virginia's at 11, Colorado's at 10, Iowa State at 9, just outside, and Arizona at 8. So to piece this, to pick it apart a bit, Josh Pate said, kind of based on the last couple of years in football. So if you even look at a Baylor, they won a Sugar Bowl. They have the same head coach they won the Sugar Bowl and the Big 12 championship with, and he put them at 14. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Iowa State being at 9, I think has some of the most stability of any team in this conference, and kind of recently went to a Big 12 championship game. Them at 9 feels low. BYU at 15. I have been to the facilities. I have walked on the practice fields, the indoor, the 2 outdoors. One is turf, one is grass in preparation for wherever they play that week. They have not just a Power 5 weight room, an elite weight room. They have the facilities. Their recruiting recently has been good, portal notwithstanding. And Kalani Sitake is an established winner at BYU. And we've decided they are 15th in the power rankings of programs in the Big 12. Josh, I like your stuff. I think you're smart. I know you're good at your job. But BYU at 15, Baylor at 14, behind Arizona State at 13. What have they done for me lately, aside from fire a Hall of Fame coach who couldn't work out there, was marred by scandal? That's weird. BYU is a game away from a bowl game. Arizona State has nothing to really stand on right now. Just tumultuous leadership. Arizona at 8 just lost its head coach. Noah Fafita's great. T-Mac, they're great. I think they can be great still. But are they a top 8 team in this? Are they a top half team in this conference ahead of Iowa State? Why is West Virginia at 11? The one thing I'd like to know about this is whether or not he took a deep dive. Also, can I mention this too? I'm gonna put a pin in what I was about to say. No, I'll tell you. I wonder if he took a deep dive in a returning production next year, a true deep dive. Here's the aside that I have here. When he mentioned Cincinnati at 16, he said, Cincinnati 16, whatever. A couple of years ago when Cincinnati was going to the college football playoff, he was singing their praises. He didn't just say whatever because he hates Cincinnati. If your team's not good, the talking heads on major networks are not going to talk about your team. That's why I said whatever about Cincinnati, because they weren't good last year, and they probably won't be that good this year. Somebody has to be the worst team in the Big 12. They're a pretty good contender. Let's be objective about this. So I understand why he said whatever. That's just the way that these people operate when it comes to bad teams. If Arizona State sucks this year, I probably won't cover them very closely like I would a team that goes 11-1 in Big 12 play. One of those teams deserves more airtime than the other. Also, I think that Josh Pate does put thought into these things. He understands, the same as I do, that it's not easy to place these teams, to rate these teams. But I don't know if he's exactly following the criteria that he's mentioned. And again, I think he was a nails guest on this show, and I think he's a great host. But I don't mind. I don't think he would mind there being pushback. And maybe he would say that this is for content mining, right? That I'm using what he said for clicks. But Josh, yes, I am, right? That's the whole, like, I don't mind breaking down this list because part of it is wild. BYU at 15 is wild. About Baylor at 14, wild. The reason that I could get on board with some of this is the teams that are on a downward trajectory. I believe Baylor's on a downward trajectory. Cincinnati right now is on a downward trajectory. You could argue Colorado is too. I know as Colorado fans would say, they were a lot better last year than they expected to be, but there's not a rapid ascent in the win column. I think there is one for West Virginia. There isn't one for Houston. They're at 12. West Virginia's at 11. Colorado's at 10. West Virginia just showed you they can win games. Why are they at 11? BYU just showed you they can win 5 games. They can get within a game of bowl eligibility. Why are they at 15? Kansas they just had an absurdly good season. Why are they at 6 behind TCU at 5? Kansas just had a much better year than Texas Tech and TCU. Why are those two teams, Texas Tech and TCU, top 5, and Kansas is not? Lance Leipold showed he's going to stay. There are pieces of this that when you think about, like, logically we think about, power rankings, the Big 12, these programs headed into 2024. Kansas is better on the football field than Oklahoma last year, and likely than Texas Tech going into this next football season based on what we know about Kansas and their return production. West Virginia is better than Colorado. Why are they rated behind Colorado? BYU is better than Arizona State. Why are they rated behind Arizona State? Baylor could be at 16 for all I care. And I just made this whole case about them going to the Sugar Bowl and having that same head coach. I think they're on a sharp downtrend, and they didn't recruit very well out of the class of 2024. I just don't think, and I like Josh, I don't think a lot of this list makes sense. Using a 3-year blend, Josh, a 3-year blend. You got a team that won a Sugar Bowl in that 3 years and a Big 12 championship at 14. It's a weird blend. You got BYU, 3-year blend, Josh. They had a guy named, I guess that was more than 3 years ago. Zach Wilson, a little bit ago-ish. It's a kind of a 3-year blend. I don't know. Whatever you say. Coming up, last night in basketball was electric. I enjoyed it on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team, and guess what? It is every single day. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. I sit here and I think, I need to make some money. So I go and I put BYU money line against Baylor alongside Texas Tech money line against TCU. And these things did not look very, very easy in the middle of these games, late in these games especially. But it all worked out in the end. Both of those teams won. And FanDuel said, you know what I'm going to give you since they won? Money. And that's why I love FanDuel. FanDuel.com/locked on. Right now, with any winning $5 bet, you can get $150 in bonus bets. That's right, $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet at FanDuel.com/locked on. I think you can do it. I think you can win money at FanDuel and prove to the world that you are good at the wagering thing and know sports. At FanDuel.com/locked on, where you get quick bets, live same game parlays, exclusive props, and more. FanDuel.com/locked on to shoot your shot. FanDuel, official sports book partner of the NBA. Last night in college basketball, in Big 12 basketball, namely, we learned once again that BYU is good. UCF is completely and utterly out of the conversation for March Madness. We already knew that, but we know it even more now. And Texas Tech has cojones. That's the word that I'm going to use for it. Texas Tech fought a game that was down to the very wire. We have almost 50% of the games in this conference end within a 5-point margin. That is how tight the basketball is in this league. And watching this BYU Baylor game, TCU Texas Tech games, they were down to the nitty gritty. I thought that Baylor had a legitimate shot at the very end. I said on Ben Criddle's show on ESPN 960 AM yesterday in Salt Lake that BYU would win by 8-10. I think the Marriott Center is worth that much against a team like Baylor that isn't an elite defensive team like Houston was when those two squads, the Cougars and the Cougars, played a while back. I thought that BYU would actually cruise a little bit more than they did. And toward the end of this game, I'm looking at the box score going, wait a second, Baylor shooting 50%? I mean, they sat around that spot for a while in this game, finished at 49%, 5 for 20 from three, and they couldn't rebound the basketball, but they were still in it. BYU had the opportunity to put Baylor away in this game. 14 for 36 from the three-point line is good. That's great. 39% when you're shooting 36 threes. BYU, that'll do it for you. 44%. BYU takes 15 more shots, gets 9 more rebounds than the Bears, 12 more assists, 20-8 is the final assist count there. But the Cougars lose the points in the paint battle. They lose the fast break points battle. They lose the free throw battle 16-6. 21 attempts for Baylor, 16 makes, 9 attempts for BYU. They made 6. The more physical team was BYU, and Ali Khalifa showed that. However, that didn't exactly work out to BYU's favor as much as I thought it should have. I was ready for BYU to put Baylor away, to get up by 15 to put Baylor away at the end of this game, and they just couldn't seem to do it. Now, you could argue the officiating wasn't great for either side. What's new? I thought the Texas Tech and TCU game actually was pretty solid. But in this one, it was just sloppy, and it felt like there was no rhythm toward the end of this game. But BYU showed that even when they play kind of clunky basketball in some areas, that they're going to struggle to blow teams out. They can struggle to blow teams out. And in March Madness, that can come back to bite you. You've already got that loss, 93-83 against Oklahoma State. You barely snuck past UCF. You barely beat Kansas State. I need to see BYU going into March blow teams out. When you shoot 15 more shots than somebody else, I need to see you blow that team out. I like Mark Pope. I like his team. But you can't play March Madness at home. Defense travels. I thought the defense was not bad. Holding Baylor to 71 points is good, but you've got to capitalize. You shoot 15 more shots than your opponent and get 9 more rebounds. TCU, Texas Tech. This was a colossal fall apart from TCU at the very end of this game. I mean, as I'm watching, I'm thinking, there's no way Jamie Dixon's team finds a way to fall apart at the very end of this one. Texas Tech shot below 40%. Shot 5 less shots than TCU. Made 4 less shots, only made 1 more three-pointer. It was the free throw game. And both of these teams are pretty good free throw shooting teams, but 86% from Texas Tech. In a contest where the Red Raiders were out-rebounded 49-36, where TCU is the more physical team, got 21 offensive boards, it all pointed to the Horned Frogs pulling away. 44-34, the Frogs led the points in the paint battle. And instead, the end of the game, Texas Tech played the long game. TCU missed not just key shots, but also key free throws. And that's how the Red Raiders were able to pull this off at home. TCU, the better basketball team, I think. And based on what I watched last night, TCU was the better basketball team, but I still think Texas Tech is dangerous. I don't know what to do. Can I be honest with you? I was just kind of waiting for Texas Tech to either get really, really hot and be the best team in the Big 12 and me be able to go, oh, here's why they're great, or they drop off the face of the earth. And they lost those 3 games in a row, and I think it was like 4 out of 6. I thought, so now we can maybe point to why Texas Tech isn't that good, but I'm still in the middle of that. That is a good to great basketball team, and I can't exactly pinpoint, what is the one driving factor for why? Pop Isaacs, who's a really good basketball player? I'm struggling with that one. Let me know if you can help me out. In essence, last night, I learned that TCU, I think, is better than Texas Tech in basketball. Texas Tech can win. Texas Tech can close out. BYU needs to get better at the blowing teams out to truly lock themselves into a Sweet 16 scenario in March Madness. Games will get away from you if you don't. Get better at the blowing out thing, because you had a perfect opportunity to do so against Baylor last night. This has been, it always will be. Hey, come back tomorrow. We're going to talk a lot more about the Big 12, obviously. Also, thanks for making that. Thanks for listening to the show. It makes me feel good when you do that. It does. This has been, it always will be, Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Dose Grande.